Now in this third part, we are going to start writing some queries that are not selection queries. So far we made select queries to display some results, but using some other forms of queries with some other SQL statements, we can actually change the data in our database. And the first one that we are going to see is going to be the update queries. So with update queries, we write the keyword update followed by the table that we are interested in, let's say the user table, and then we set some attribute of this table. So for example, I can write update the user table and set the credit of the users to 0, for example. If I run such query, all the credits of all users will be 0. So that's one thing to be careful about. So if I run this query, there is no simple undo option. It will change all the data. Also with deletion as well, you should be careful before running your queries. So instead of just setting the credit to an exact value, what we can do is we can set it based on the actual value of the credit. So I can write increase the credit of the users by 10. So let me check the credits of users. It's like 300, 520, etc. I will close this table under tools and SQL in execute SQL statement. This time I don't need to show the output. It can be enabled. It doesn't matter. This is going to change the data. If I click on execute, it will say that 20 rows updated. If I check the user table again, I will see that for each user the credit amount is increased. But sometimes we also need some additional criterion. So instead of rising all users' credits, maybe we are going to increase the credit amount only for some specific users. And let's say in this case the question says that increase the credit of the users that live in Ankara or Istanbul by 10. So similar to our select query, we can include where statements, and in here I can write city should be in this set of things, and in here I have Ankara and I have Istanbul. So these are my conditions, and if these users satisfy that condition, I increase their credit by 10. And if I paste and execute this, now I see that only 6 rows are updated. And if you check that, those ones are living in Ankara or Istanbul. There are 6 people satisfying that condition and they got an increase. And one thing to realize is that if I execute this query multiple times, it increases every time I run this query. So for example, you might have some monthly query that you execute once in a month, and it will maybe increase the payment of the users, etc. Maybe they are given raise. So with numbers we can have such operations. We can also have operations for other data types. For example, the other question says that set status of users that were born before 1980 to full. So for example, from the user table, this time I would like to set the status, but not to a relative value. I just give the value directly as a string. This time our condition is for the date of birth, and I would like date of birth to be less than something. Remember, for the date we include the year followed by the month and then the day. So this is going to be my query, and if I execute it, this time it says that 9 rows are updated. If I check the user table, now I have more users with the status saying full. And with this query, if I execute it multiple times, it will not change because the date of birth is not changing. It will always update 9 rows because whether the status is already full or not, we update it to be full. So if some other condition was saying that it should not be full before, then after we execute it once, it will not execute for the same rows again. So what I try to say is that if I were to say that another condition is for the status to be not equal to full, so this is going to be my query. If I execute it, nothing will be updated because I already made the ones that satisfy the condition with the status full. But if I go back to my user table and maybe change some user that satisfies that condition to half, for example, for now I have one user that satisfies that condition, and if I run this query now, it will be updated. It says one row is updated, but if I execute it again, it will not update it again because I have a condition saying that it should not be full beforehand. So the other one says that increase each user's credit by the monthly payments of the companies that this user is a partner of. With the note it says, if the user is a partner of multiple companies, he or she will be paid multiple times. So actually this is the existing reason of this tables. Remember, we have a bunch of users, they have their credits stored, and we have a bunch of companies, and users are partners of companies. And for each company that this user is a partner of, there is actually a monthly payment. So in each month, let's say there is some query that we would like to run to increase the number of credits of that user. And for example, if William is the partner of company number 4 and 10, we will increase its credit by 50 plus 125. So for the sum of all the monthly payments that this user is a partner of, we would like to increase the credit of this user. So what we try to achieve is to actually increase the credits of this user by some value. How to find that value? This time we would like to include a subquery without introducing a new user table. So let me write a subquery first. We can make the join operation, right? So let me do it first. We can write select something from the tables. Let me first include the user table for now. From the user table, from the partner of table, and also from the company table, I have my join conditions saying that ID of the user should be equal to the user ID that is coming from the partner of table, and I have the other condition saying that CID of company should be equal to company ID. So my two conditions to join these tables. And in here I can write, for example, the sum of monthly payment per user. But to run it separately, so let me first do it like this. I would like to show the ID and also the monthly payment from this table. Payment. Let me also include the double quotations, otherwise it will not run. So this is going to be my subquery. Let me first run it. So in here, tools, SQL. When you execute it, I need to also show the results. It's a selection query. For user number 1, this user is the partner of 3 different companies, and the last company is actually the one that we just created, the Ocean Arts with CID 11. If it does not appear for your version, it could be the difference if you did not include that new company. But other than that, we have for each user we have the monthly payments, right? But this time from this I would like to get the monthly payments per user. So actually I would like to find the sum of monthly payments, but as it is we cannot do it. Let me check. If I try to execute such query, it says that sum is going to return one value, but for ID we have multiple. Then there is the problem. But with a subquery that does not introduce a new table, meaning that, so I have my user table for the update statement, and instead of creating a new user here in my subquery, so this user is gone, but this time for this user that's outside my subquery, I want this ID to match with the user ID of partner of. I don't need to write it like this, but to be able to see it better, I'm writing. So these are my conditions. Since the names of the attributes are different, I don't need to specify which table these are coming from. But to see which tables are involved, I'm writing them. So the partner of table is inside my subquery, but the user table is coming from the outside. And because of this reason, so I don't need to actually show the IDs, right? I can just sum up the monthly payments. But since for each user, so there is going to be a different user, right? When we are updating something, we are updating the credits of the users. It will go through each of the users, and for each of these users, I'm going to calculate the monthly payments. Because the user that's outside my subquery is going to match with the user ID for my partner of relation. So this is actually going to give me the value that I would like to update the credits by. So let me try to write it in a better form. We are adding the credits, and what I add is the result of this subquery. And this subquery alone is not meaningful. So if I try to run this subquery by itself, so let me try to do that. If I try to run it by itself, it will give a problem because user ID is not defined in here. There is no separate user table in this subquery. It only makes sense when we include the user table that's outside the subquery. So if I run this, let me first check for user number 1, for example. Current credit is 310. And if I check which companies this user is a partner of, these are 4, 10, 11. And if I check the companies 4, 10, 11, they get 50. So in total, we will increase by 275. And if I run this query, so set function on non-numeric data is not allowed, it says. I guess we are doing something wrong. Okay, actually, for the current version that I'm using, the monthly payment is a text. So going to edit, monthly payments was a text. I will change it to a number and update it. So in the version that you are seeing, it is also the same thing, but I guess I can fix it and upload it so that when we run in the lab, there won't be a problem. So now if I go in my SQL and run this now, it says that successfully executed. It's updated for all of my users. And if I check my user volume, I will see that before it was 310, it increased by 275, which is for all companies that William is a partner of. So that solves the question. And each time that we run this query, it will update it according to the values that we have in those other tables. So let's also do some deletion query. So with the deletion, we use the following form. We write delete from one table, and it's also important with update queries. After update, we just write one table's name because we operate on just one table, but we can use information that is coming from other tables. And to include such information from other tables with update statements, we include them as subqueries. With delete as well, the same thing is applicable. We delete from, let's say, the user table, and if you run this query, it will delete every user. So let's have a condition saying that credit is larger than 1,000. So only delete these users that satisfy this condition. So when you are deleting as well, be careful. If you have lots of entries, you don't want to lose them. So it says one row is updated. If I execute it again, nothing is updated because there was only one user with credit number higher than 1,000, and we lost that user. We deleted that user, and because of our relationships, remember under tools and relationships, for these links we set update and delete cascade options, and since that user is deleted, I guess if you check the IDs, that user was number 16, and number 16 in partner of is also gone. If you check, that user was partner of some companies, but it's no longer available because of this cascade on delete option. So in the handout we give one more example for deletion. So similar to select queries, with update and delete, we can have lots of different conditions. So that's actually saying that, for example, we can say that surname includes the letter A, and user lives in these cities, in one of these cities. So, and the credit is higher than 1,000. In this case, in this rare case, just delete that user. For example, this is saying that delete the users that have more than 1,000 credits and whose surname include the letter A and living in one of the following cities of Ankara, Istanbul, or Izmir. One final thing is to insert new data using SQL statements. So we can insert new data to our tables directly. If I open the table, for example, I'm able to insert a new row. But with SQL statements as well, we can insert new rows. This is going to be useful when we start coding using Visual Basic. So in the upcoming labs, it will be useful. But for now, we can insert into some table, for example, the user table, and we can write the values that we would like to insert. So if we would like to insert it according to the same order of columns, meaning that if I check the user table, the order of fields is ID, name, surname, credit, status, date of birth, and city. So if I were to use the same order for this new user, for example, 21, since this is going to be a string in single quotation, John Doe, with credit 100, with status full, and with date of birth 1995 10/15, and with city Ankara, I can use this query to insert this new user. So let me close this user table, execute this statement. It says that, okay, unexpected end of command, because with Ankara I forgot to include the ending single quotation. So now it says that command successfully executed, one row is updated. If I check the user table, if it was already open, I can use this refresh key. But I see that this new entry is now here. There is also a second option. So let's say that I don't know the ordering, or maybe I don't want to include the some of the attributes, for example. That's also possible in this database. In that case, I need to specify which attribute is what. So for example, let's say that I would like to first insert the name, followed by the credit, followed by the ID, for example. Let's just keep these three things. In that case, what I need to write for values is going to be John, so single quotation since this is a string, 100, and for ID, if I try to insert the same ID again, it will be a problem. Let's see the error. It says that violation of unique constraint, so duplicate values for the primary key ID. Then I need to specify a different ID for this new user. Although the name is same, it's a different user. Now I inserted it. You will see that this table was already open. I need to click on the refresh button to see the newly added results. I see that John is with the ID 22, it's added, and the columns that I left empty is not there. And if you want to include everything, you can specify the full thing again. So let me just copy it from here, paste it here. I just need to switch the ID to a new person, and if I execute this query now, I will see that when I refresh, this row is here as well. What I changed is the order of the attributes, so I gave the order with some different order. If I do not specify this new order, so if I write it like this, then I can't use a new ordering. So let me change it to a valid primary key. But if I try to execute this, it says wrong data type, because now I'm trying to insert John for the ID, which is not applicable. John is a string, but the ID is a number. So that concludes lab 3. So in this lab, we actually used some of your knowledge from SQL. So you already saw how to use SQL in class, but we used it in LibreOffice, and we made some examples. Some of them I guess you already saw in the class. Some of them could be a little different, but these would be useful when we start creating our graphical user interfaces. In lab 4, we will see a bunch of more complex queries. And then for lab 5 and 6, we will start implementing forms. So right now, we are using this window. We write some queries. And if those queries are going to be helpful, you can store them in some text file, for example. Like this, I can collect my queries in some text file, write what is this doing, and then later on we might use them. So in next lab, we will do a bunch of complex queries. So it will use a similar logic with this lab, but only the difference is that the queries are more complex. And they will not get more complex than that. In your databases, they will be actually, most of them will be simpler. So in this lab as well, some of the queries were kind of complicated. But then in labs 5 and 6, we will start using forms. And forms are like graphical user interfaces to user to interact with. So we will include some buttons, etc. And the user will click on the button, and then we will connect this button to some query. In the backend, it will run some query. And with some queries, remember, we need to input some parameters, right? For those, we will include some text boxes. For example, we would like to find the users that have some credit larger than a given limit. For example, for that limit, the user will enter that limit here, click on the button, and we will display the results, etc. So that's what's going to happen in the upcoming labs.